guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to check out how to make funky, deep, minimal, deep tech house music in the style of Robbie Doherty. Robbie's been killing it in the past few years. He's an absolute mainstay in the Beatport deep tech and minimal top 10. He's got releases on PIV, Meta, Knee Deep in Sound, Overdose, some really top labels, and his sound is awesome. If you like the track that's playing in the background, it's a new one of mine called Live Free on Steve Bugg's label Subleased. It's killing it in the charts at the moment. There's a link in the description if you want to go and support it. So as always, you can download the project files for this video. There's a link in the description. It goes to my Patreon. It's the best way to support the channel. There's a lot of resources there on Patreon. I post the project files from all of these tutorial style videos, so go check it out. Now let's just jump into Ableton and make some house music. Alright guys, so here we are inside Ableton, and this is a wee deep tech minimal house kind of thing that I've put together in the style of Robbie Doherty. I referenced some of his tracks from PIV, Knee Deep in Sound, and got something going that I thought was in the right kind of direction. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? So the first thing I'd like to address is my process for actually creating this sketch. Something I hear from people a lot is they face a problem where they make a detailed loop, a lot of drums, a lot of bass going on, and then they get to the point where they need to add some personality, some synths, some vocals, something along those lines, and they struggle to find something to fit. I used to face this problem myself for years actually, and I changed my workflow and my creative process to basically work on finding the theme and the personality of the track first, and then developing the other elements around it. So I'll show you what I did in this project to get to the final track and how I went about it. So first of all, I started with a kick and one clap, this main hat, the rim. So that's what I had. Very simple, clean groove. Then I noticed when I was referencing Robbie's tracks that most of them had like a pretty prominent vocal sample. The melodic elements were often quite kind of background, atmospheric type things. They weren't really like the main theme or the main hook of the track. Generally, the tracks were really focused around a vocal. First thing I found was this vocal. It's called Vox with all these numbers because I consolidated it. It had some weird timing, so I consolidated it so that I could put it into a simpler. That's why it's got the weird name anyway. Let's have a listen.
My heart beats like a drum machine for you.
So a bit weird vocal, but I liked what he was saying, and that's where I started from. I also found another couple of vocal bits.
Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat. You make me feel so good.
So I thought it would be cool to kind of combine something along those lines. So the first thing I started working on was this kind of spoken word vocal. I checked the key, found it was in D sharp minor, so that gave me a key for the track. So now that I've got a key, I made a sub bass, as I noticed that Robbie's tracks were very focused around a bass line. It was a really prominent element. All right. So now I've got that, I worked on some vocal chops. I took the vocal and sectioned it out into different pieces. There's one where it says beats, drum machine, or like a drum, and then my heart. And then I made this cool little groove that I thought worked with the bass and the rhythm of the drums that I have. Cool, so now I've got a theme going on, it's working together. Then I listened to some more reference tracks and I noticed that he was quite often using vocoded vocals. So I thought, okay, great, I'm going to use a vocoded vocal. That's how I can incorporate both of these. I don't have to worry about key because the key is determined by the carrier source, the synth that's being used for the vocoder. So then I added some vocoder parts. So now I've got a theme, the personality of the track, the thing that people are going to remember, the thing that's going to separate it from other tracks, right? So now I can go through the production process, develop the track, and I know what's the main focus. I know what I want to accentuate and what I want to emphasize. So now it's a process of creating parts that work with these elements that I've already got, with this foundation that I've already set and created. If I'd done this in reverse, made like a really detailed, multi-layered bass line, a whole bunch of drums, it would be so much harder to find something to fit with that. I find doing it in this order just really streamlines the process. So now that that's done and dusted, let's just jump in and have a look at the actual elements in the track. So we've got a kick. I just sampled this from one of Robbie's tracks. Link to a video up here where I show you how to do that. You can steal any kick from any track, borrow, sample. So it's actually quite a punchy, tough kick, quite aggressive sounding. It's just a 4/4 pattern, but in a few little bits, little places, I've kind of added some little variations in the MIDI. In this section here, I've got it playing a slightly different pattern. Some little fills and things, but essentially it's just a kick. These light pink sections are showing places where I've filtered out to the base of the kick. And let's have a look at the claps. So this is the clap I showed you before. It's also sampled from one of Robbie Doherty's tracks. Now you'll notice here, it's going over 2.5 bars. So the reason I've done that, I've got it moved slightly off the grid. That one's on the grid, and that one's slightly different. So the reason that is looping over a non-full bar time signature is because it's interacting with another clap here. So I've got this other clap which I've pulled slightly before the downbeat. So these are also all moved by hand, and this is happening over 2.5 bars. So the reason that I do that is it's changing the interaction between all of these. So they're looping at different times, and that's going to randomize the interaction between them. This changes over a long period, and creates just slight variation and differentiation between them. Also adding to that, I've got some pan randomization on each. So just a very little bit, but this is just creating a very small change over a longer sequence. Those claps are being clipped using the saturator just to chop off the transient. You can see what's happening here in this Oscillos Megascope. And that's just happening so that when it plays with the kick, it doesn't trigger the limiter. Then I've got this groove clap. So this is just adding some groove, as it says on the tin. Cool, good stuff. Now, the hats, there's a few layers, but it's mainly focused around this main hat, which is just playing on the offbeats with a few little groove accentuation hits, lower velocity, a bit of swing, and it sounds like this. You'll see here I've just taken out a little, almost 1 dB of a little frequency that I felt was sticking out too much. I haven't pulled it right down because it does add some character, but I found it a little bit annoying. I'll accentuate the frequency so you can see what I'm talking about. Then when I take it all the way down, it sounds a bit bland. So I'm just really, really subtly pulling that out as it was annoying me a bit. You don't want to be too heavy-handed with this kind of thing, because some of those resonances can also be adding some kind of personality to the sounds. Now, I felt that was like a really cool hat, but it was a little bit top-heavy. So I've got this loop here, and I've just taken off the tops. And it just layers really nicely with the first one. It's got a few other little groove kind of elements in there, so it creates some nice interaction and thickens up the hats a lot. Now you can hear that little edit there. I'll get to that, but it's really cool. Next, I've got this ride groove and open 808. The open 808 sound, you'll recognize this straight away. Just add some kind of interest and texture to the groove, really. Same with this ride groove. It's this more metallic sounding one. So they're not doing too much, they're just kind of creating some call and response within the hats. I've got this shaker loop just to kind of pick up the pace, add a bit of interest and texture, but what I've done is put a flanger and an auto pan on it. So before this processing, it sounded like this. I've also pulled in the envelope. So just making it a bit tighter. For this kind of style, you want your hats to be really nice and tight. All right, processing. Makes it way more interesting, but also not as prominent. So it kind of adds it like a interesting texture loop layer. Fits in really nicely, gives some nice character to the drums. So the next thing I've done is found this old house loop. So this is from an old kind of early 2000s sample pack called Houseworks. I've taken out all the lows. It's actually got a kick in the loop. I've pulled in the envelope on it quite a bit. I'm using an LFO tool to side chain out the kick and the clap. So I don't want that too much. I just want it to kind of add some more atmosphere. And it's basically doing something similar to this hat body, but just a bit different and just kind of picks up the pace in some sections. So let's have a listen to that. I'll just show you what the original sounded like. So that's a really cool tip for you to look back, go find some like old sample packs. Same kind of idea as sampling vinyl or something like that. A lot of these old sample packs are like really unquantized, and some of them are usually badly named. They came off CDs and difficult to use, but it gives your tracks a cool aesthetic, cool texture, and it means you're probably not using the same loops that everyone else is getting off Splice and Loop Cloud. So anyway, this is what it sounds like in context. Very nice in my opinion. Now I've got a couple of percussion bits. The rim shot I showed you before, this was one of the foundational elements. You can hear it interacting with that groove clap. I've got this percussion loop thing that I've made. It sounds like this. Kind of like a knocky sound. It's from the start of a percussion loop. It plays really nicely interacting with the kick. Gives it like a really nice swingy feel. Also, we've got this noise glitch. This is a really cool sound. It's being fed through a vocoder. Without the vocoder, it sounds like this. And the vocoder gives it that noise sound because we're using the carrier set to noise. This LFO is changing the formant. The formant is kind of like how bright or the character of the noise. So that's just changing randomly so that each hit changes and gives it more of a glitchy kind of feel, a bit more randomization. How did I get this? Well, I created it from a percussion loop, which I'll show you here. Kind of like a bongo tribal-esque loop. Cool stuff. What I've done with that is pulled in the envelope a bit and then added tantra. Gives it that kind of glitchy vibe. I froze that and then dragged the audio up to this track. There, I've pulled in the envelope even more. I quantized it and added some swing and then added the processing. So in the context, it sounds like this. Nothing too major, but it just kind of helps to fill out those gaps and gives it some of the vibe we're looking for. All right, so that is the drums done and dusted. You will hear these little, how do you call them? Fills, I suppose. It's just some effects that I've got going on the drum bus. So I've also got some sends to a reverb and a delay, but I'm just going to turn those off like this. This audio effect rack on is what's creating this fill. So we can see here, this is the audio effect rack. It's got a EQ cutting out the lows and the highs. It's got a beat repeat with this slapback preset and this tremolo with this dirty tremolo. I'll turn off the tremolo and the slapback, let you hear what the EQ is doing. I'll turn on the tremolo. So this is just moving it from side to side. Very cool sound. And then this beat repeat gives it a bit more glitchiness. I think this has got some randomization in it as well. It just adds like a really nice effect that works with the elements of the track. So that means that when different things are playing at different times, the effect is going to be slightly different. Also, depending on how long it's turned on for, you can see here it's longer, here it's shorter. Now, I've also got these sends, one to a delay and one to a reverb. So here's just the delay. Just working like an effect sound to kind of add some vibe and some atmosphere. And here is some reverb happening. Nice. It kind of sounds like a white noise crash type thing. So really cool little trick that you can easily use to add some texture and character to your drums. All right, let's have a look at the bass line. So as I said, I started with the sub. So we'll turn off the other one. It's just an operator, 3 layers. I think they're called carriers on an FM. So I started with this on saw 4, turn that on. So already just with the kind of, I don't know, operator FM, it's kind of what you want for this style. All these guys are using FM basses, or a lot of these guys are using FM basses. So we add on this layer to FM it a bit. And another layer. So we've still got that nice, solid, warm sub, but we're just getting a few more harmonics up a bit higher. Really nice stuff. The bass pattern like this, it's quite intricate. You'll notice that a lot of these tracks have this kind of downbeat and offbeat bass notes with a few 16th notes that help to give it a bit of groove, but they're really focused on the downbeat and the offbeat. I've noticed this in quite a few of these more minimal house tracks that I've done. So that's a little tip for programming your bass. You can hear it quite well with the kick. It really gives it this kind of groove, like dun 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 dun. And then the octaves and stuff help to add interest. I find like writing this type of stuff, I start with 1 bar, add another bar with some variation, duplicate that, add some more variation in the end. So I'm just kind of like taking a smaller phrase and making it work over a longer phrase. I find it difficult to conceptualize something like this if I start with 4 bars. So I start small and add variation as I go. Now I've got a bass top. This is, I'll turn off the processing. It's a preset from Ableton called Guitar Bass. And all I've done is turned off one of these. I just messed around, experimented, tried different things. I think I messed around with the filter a little bit as well. But let's check out what this processing is doing. I'm obviously cutting out the lows because we've got the sub. So I'm adding in a bit of saturation. Turn this on last, cutting out the lows. Chorus. Then this erosion. Just adding the character. Love it. I think Coulter uses this preset. I think it was from him that I saw this. I don't know. A lot of these guys are using Ableton stuff. I've seen an interview with Robbie Doherty and he pretty much uses exclusively Ableton Live synths and effects and things. So this sits really nicely on top of that sub. Now because I'm adding this chorus, I've got this utility with this bass mono turned up to 200, just kind of protecting the phase cancellation. controlling the width, yeah? So on the bass group, I've got this limiter. Because of the way these are interacting, and I'm not sure, something to do with the synths, there's quite a lot of variation in volume. I'm just using this limiter to control those peaks. So it's just controlling the dynamics, basically. Then I've got this LFO tool where I'm ducking it a little bit more while the kick is playing. So this automation is just turning that off in the break. So it just helps it to groove a little bit more. But in the break here, I thought it's not necessary. I want this layer to stand out a bit more. Cool stuff. FM synthesis, it's the key. As I said, the melodic elements tend to be a bit more important to the theme of the track than the melodic elements, so we'll go through them first. I kind of showed you this vocal chop thing. I've got a bit of processing on it, just to give it a bit more vibe and control the dynamics, obviously, with that. I'll group it and turn it off. So it just pushes it in the background a bit more, helps it feel a bit more groovy and atmospheric, and sits in with the other elements quite nicely. So pretty cool, I think. This is probably more interesting. I haven't really talked about this on the channel before. So this here is from the bass. So all I've done is copy down the bass, MIDI, Control A to select all, and then hit legato. And that just pushes all of the notes to their full length until it hits another note. So that's all I've done here. To create this differentiation, I've got a high version and a low version. So this one's exactly the same, just pitched down an octave. And this is on the synth that is creating the carrier for the vocoder. I'll turn this send only to master so we can actually hear it. Otherwise it's not going to play any audio, it's just being sent. So I just created a wavetable patch with some saw waves. It's also got a sub with like full amount of tone. And on oscillator 2, I've got it up 7 semitones. So it's playing a chord, full sustain on the amplification, no filter. Got some unison there just to kind of thicken it up, make it sound cool. I'll turn that utility off. So this is what it sounds like. So big sound. I put this overdrive on here to pump it up. Just increases the volume, adds some harmonics. I've got the dynamics pulled down, so it's like squashing it. Then I took the utility and made it mono because it sounds a bit weird when I'm using the vocal to create the vocoder effect if everything's like really spread out and with the chorus, with the unison, sorry. So that's why I've got this. Cool. Let's turn that back to sends only. Can no longer hear it. Now, what we're doing here is using the vocoder. You see we've got the carrier set to external, then vocoder synth, which is this one, post effects. The way a vocoder works, basically it takes that signal that's being played out of the synth, out of the wavetable, and it kind of applies a gate to it, and then uses the input, in this case this vocal, to bring through the sound of the synth. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's a very basic, rudimentary explanation. If I try and make it more complicated, I'll probably screw it up. Keep it simple. This is what it sounds like. And you'll see here we've got this high chords and low chords, right? I mentioned that before. So low chords. If we go back to the vocoder synth, I don't think I showed this, master. Just playing that lower octave, gritty, like more rough sounding, darker sounding. When we actually use the vocal through the vocoder, it makes it kind of sound bright and happy, and then like pitched down, darker. So listen to the contrast of this. Creates a really cool effect when we're coming into the break here. You make me feel so good. So you can hear when it plays with the higher octave, it kind of sounds a bit more happy and positive, and when it plays with the lower octave, it sounds a bit more moody. So really cool effect. I just wanted to make it sound a bit more spacey, so I've added my favorite L chorus LX and a bit of delay and reverb. So all good stuff there. Now we've got this effects group, very simple effects. Of course, I showed you how we're using the processing on the drum bus to create effects. I've got this snare fill, which is just a snare pattern like this from East End Dubs single hits pack, automating this EQ to bring in the volume with the gain and just fading in this top band. So it's a bit filtered out and then it gets brighter and louder. At the end there, I've got these really fast 30-second note fills, which I saw was like a pretty common trope in some of the recent like PIV tracks, and I'm pretty sure I heard Robbie Doherty using it. Yeah, that's that. It's a snare fill. It's got this kind of like nice old school drum machine sound to it. Gives it like a bit of a retro feel. The sample, I mean, it's kind of something that might have been used in like a 90s hip-hop track. We've got a crash. It's a crash. I'm doing a little fill before the drop here. And then we've got this vinyl crackle. This is just used to add a bit of ambience, fill out some of that kind of dead space. The drum beat's relatively simple. We've got a bit of kind of skippy variation going on in there. We want it to remain kind of spacious. This is just adding a bit of vibe. One cool thing that I've done here is I'm sidechaining it to the drum bus. So when the drums are playing, they are kind of bringing down the volume of the vinyl noise. And then in the break, when the drums aren't playing, it brings up the vinyl noise a little bit and lets it be a bit louder, provide a bit more atmosphere. All right, so let's have a look at the melodic elements in here. As I said at the start, they're generally supporting elements, so there's nothing too crazy going on here. We've got this clavinet sound. So what I've done here is made a D sharp minor 7th chord with these two notes inverted, right? And then I've just turned some of the notes on and off to create variation. Just really cool little groove element, really. Just doing some call and response with the percussion and the other synth elements. So we've got these two pads. Now, I'll show you this, how the call and response is getting built up. Cool. So this is just an audio sample using this LFO to automate this LFO. So it's just moving it like this, you can see, and then that is assigned to the filter. So essentially that's just making the filter frequency wobble a bit, and it's doing it kind of randomly, so that each time it plays it sounds a little different. Got some saturation just to thicken it out, some EQ, nothing crazy. This pad here, it's trying to also add some randomization, some variation. This time I'm just using a flanger preset. I want these to sound different, so they're like separated from one another. Obviously they're different source sounds, but yeah. So I had all this going on and it was working well to kind of fill out the groove. When we look at the MIDI, you can see it's kind of doing call and response. I then found this funk keys, which is also another clavinet or something, electric piano type sound. Really cool. So I made a kind of more busy loop, just messing around, and simplified it. It's a common part of my workflow. I want things to be simple in the end. They're more catchy if they're simple. Yeah, so just adding to the call and response, a different harmonic texture, a different harmonic layer, just a different characteristic. And it's got this really kind of fun, interesting funk vibe. It gives the beat a light-hearted, fun feel. Now, something that's really common is an M1 organ sound. So it's just the classic M1 organ bass. So I add this in the break to kind of build things up and then have it playing a simple rhythmic pattern, almost like a percussion sound. It's just this really familiar, feel-good sound. Got a little bit of processing on there. What I like to do when I use the M1 is I take off all the internal processing and add my own. It makes it sound a little bit more unique and it gives me a bit more control. Obviously this is a third-party plugin. It's a cheap one and it's got so many iconic sounds, so I do recommend you grab it. It's often on sale, I think for around 50 bucks. I just want to point out that I will freeze anything that has any third-party plugins, but if you download the project from Patreon, there will be a few third-party plugins that won't work. However, they're not integral to the sound design or anything like that. It's like things like my drum reverb. They're all explained in my template, which I'll link the video up here. You can go check that out. I also have a download of my template that I've recreated with Ableton-only plugins, and that's also explained in the video. Just so you're aware, if you download the project, that's going to be the case. So let's play it through from the top, and you can see how it all comes together. So what do you think about that one? Let me know in the comments. Link in the description to Patreon if you want to download the project. It's a really great way to consolidate the learning. These videos can move a bit quickly, so you can really take your time to look through each element and try and understand how it was made. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Really fun one to make. Cool, groovy sounds. I love it. If you like these videos I do about how to make music in the style of different artists, then check out this playlist. There's a lot of stuff there. That's it from me today. I'll catch you next time. Peace.